Hi, I'm Louise and today we're having a bit of a chat about my first quarter wrap up for 2026. According to Storygraph, so far this year I have managed to read 45 books. I've been reading more digital books than I usually would. Normally my stats on Storygraph come in a third for each audio, digital and physical, and this quarter I seem to be skewing a bit more digital at the expense largely of physical books, but also a little bit of audio. I expected it to skew away from audio a little bit over the winter because I'm out and about less, I'm sitting indoors more, I am probably more likely to read with my eyes, but I didn't feel like I had moved away from paperbacks and hardbacks as much as I have. I started out the year by saying that I wasn't going to be doing as many readathons or as many reading challenges, but that has proven an absolute lie. So first I'm going to talk to you about the books I DNF'd or was disappointed in. Then we'll go on to the books that I've picked as absolute standouts each month. Then maybe we'll talk a little bit about those reading challenges and wrap up with anything non-book related. Doing these wrap-up videos is new for me this year, so the style of them might change slightly over the course of the year, but I do intend on coming in roughly every quarter just to recap and review where we are. I feel like it makes the most sense to start with the DNFs, the books that I quit relatively early and therefore don't know much about, and then to chat a little bit about maybe the disappointments before we move on to happier and brighter topics. So far this year I've had 4 DNFs, which I don't think is bad percentage wise. I want to try and DNF more, or I want to DNF quicker. I want to waste less time on books I'm not enjoying. So perhaps I'll try and keep track roughly of this stat and see how I get on with it over the course of the year and see incoming years. The first was The North Wind by Alexandria Warwick. I was reading this as part of Polarathon. It has been on my TBR for a long time. It has this stunning cover and I'd seen it in a lot of bookshops. It's the first in a romantasy quartet, which I think follows a different couple in each book, but I got through about 50% before I'd had enough of it. I've read Warwick before. I read her, I think it was her debut self-published back in like 2017, a desert set fantasy horse race, I think. And it just goes to show how you can feel about an author from one book to the next, because that I remember 10 years ago giving, I think, a 5-star rating and really enjoying it. Then after I DNF'd this one, I read another book from the same author, again with a kind of wintry polar setting. And again, I gave that one a 5-star. So it's not that I don't like Warwick's writing or her plotting or whatever, but this one just didn't work for me. It reminded me a lot of the kind of big names in the genre, which we've seen done a few times now. And it had that, I don't want to say stereotypical, but it had that male lead that is grumpy. I think you're meant to find that endearing or masculine, and instead I just found him boring and a little neglectful. I didn't want our protagonist to fall for the love interest, which I feel in a romantasy takes away a lot of the point. I did give it probably longer than I should have before just accepting that I wasn't going to get on with it. The next one that I DNF'd was Shield of Sparrows by Devney. And this, again, romantasy, nothing in it was really clicking for me. I had heard such good things about this. I had seen rave reviews, only 5-star reviews. I hadn't seen any dissent on this one. And so, again, I probably clung to this longer than I had to because I really wanted to get on board with the camp of absolutely loving it. I did think it was doing some interesting things. This wasn't a DNF because I'd seen it so many times before. It did feel like it was trying to do something unusual. I just wasn't connecting to any of the characters. I wasn't particularly interested in the plot. I wasn't excited to get back to it. It was a chore, so I decided it was better to cut my losses and run. The other two I was much more decisive on, like much more. So at least I'm progressing in that sense. I was reading Until the World Falls Down by Jordan Lind with Amanda at Amanda's Booktopia as a buddy read in March. I had picked it up purely based on the title with that labyrinth reference. That's one of my favourite 80s movies. I've longed for a really, really good labyrinth retelling. And with the stunning cover, I thought this might be it. Unfortunately, it just didn't work for me at all in any way, shape or form. I did give it an extra few pages because I wanted to wait until I heard from Amanda what she was thinking, whether she was going to continue it. I feel like what I actually experienced in the book was short enough that I'm quite proud how early I DNF'd. Then the last one was A Woman of Substance. This one I did read a fair number of pages. I think I read about 100 pages, but this book is an absolute beast. And my 100 pages really only took me to about 10%. So again, I feel for me, that's quite an early DNF and quite a decisive one. I picked this up with the intention of reading it this month for Aurelium, but I used a scroll so I could try it early. And if I enjoyed it, at least eat up some of those pages in March so that in April I didn't have quite as many to get, just to get, you know, the one prompt ticked off. But I was able to decide before April the 1st that this book just wasn't for me. It's a kind of woman's life story, family saga, and I knew that that isn't something that I would be particularly interested in, but because there's a really gorgeous new adaptation coming out that I really, really want to watch. If I watch it first, I'll never read the book, so I knew that I had to read the book first if I was ever going to. Writing is just not for me. It was bogged down in details, telling me about the decor in her 80s boardroom. I have since started the adaptation. I think I've watched the first 2 episodes and it is stunningly beautiful, and all the description she gives in the book has clearly really helped and influenced the set design of the show, and I think the show is going to be stunning, but probably one where watching the 8 episodes in season 1 I think will cover the first half of the book, and I think that'll be a far more enjoyable experience than reading it. So maybe in one of these rare instances where the adaptation is actually the better choice. So those were the books that I just didn't finish, but I did also have some books that I powered through and was just kind of disappointed in, or I ended up rating on the lower side of the scale. It's not that I hated them, they just didn't live up to what I expected, or I didn't get as much enjoyment as I would have hoped. The obvious one here is Stephen King's Salem's Lot. I read this in a vlog in January where I was trying Stephen King for the first time. And as I've never read King before, but he is such a classic in the genre, I had really, really high hopes. And I would have been more disappointed, I think, if I hadn't read a second book, The Shawshank Redemption, at the same time as I read Salem's Lot. And I think that really helped. Salem's Lot didn't work. It was far too long. It wasn't exciting. I liked the idea and the metaphor of vampirism as a social condition or as a social disease, but the book itself just didn't do anything for me. And I spent way longer reading it than the amount of appreciation I got out of it. So that's a little bit sad. The other letdown I had at the beginning of the year was kind of expected. I decided I was going to reread all 8 books in the Wizards subseries of Terry Pratchett's Discworld books. Now, I know that the Wizards subseries are generally my least favourite books in the Discworld, so I'm not expecting fantastic 5-star reviews. I just want to go back and see if, having now finished the series, being in some of these books 20 odd years out from the first time I read them, to see whether my opinion on them's changed. And I do think I enjoyed The Colour of Magic, the first book, a little bit more on reflection. And since The Light Fantastic, I have read Sorcery. Also, I enjoyed a little bit more than I remember, but The Light Fantastic was kind of what I recalled. It hit maybe about a 2-star for me, which is funny considering I would say Pratchett's my absolute all-time favourite author, but there's just some books in that massive series that are never going to be for me, and I know as I go through these 8 that most of them are my least favourite in the fuller Discworld, so there's going to be some low ratings. But yeah, Light Fantastic was one of my lower rated books for the month. In February, I actually didn't have any books that I considered low rated. I was fighting through a bit of a head cold at the time, and so my reading slumped a little. I did go for things that were a little cozier, a little maybe lighter, things that I was fairly confident I was going to enjoy. I really wasn't pushing myself on anything. And then we went into March and I really hammered in on mystery novels for March Mystery Madness and a few middle grade mysteries for middle grade March. In that I found a lot of really good books, but I also had a few disappointments. First one would be Leonie Swan's Three Bags Full. This is being adapted for a movie with Hugh Jackman in the summer called The Sheep Detectives, and it has such an unusual concept. It is the murder of a shepherd in Ireland, but the case is shown to us and investigated by his flock of sheep. And I love the idea of it, and I do think Leonie Swan done something really impressive with it. You definitely feel like you are in the point of view of a flock of sheep. It has a very kind of inhuman way of looking at the characters and the motivations that the sheep perceive. It just didn't grab me the way I wanted it to. I was interested, I did keep reading and I didn't DNF. I just didn't get that spark that I wanted from it. I'm hoping that the adaptation might be able to fix that in some way, but we'll see. The other books that I would consider on the slightly lower end of my scale were also both mysteries. One was The Last Chance Hotel by Nicki Thornton. That was a middle grade mystery with a fantasy angle. And the other was A Slice of Mystery by Sophie Madden. That was a contemporary, I want to say cozy mystery with a sapphic protagonist, but there was so many elements in it that didn't hit the usual cozy genre, and I'm not sure whether I really liked that it did that or whether that's maybe why it didn't work for me. We followed a character involved in essentially marketing other businesses' products, going in and tightening their, not their production line, but their way of running the business. I think that's a great idea for a series because you can change up the business she's in every book. I would have liked to have seen more of that. If it had been longer, it might have been able to do more with it. But if it had been longer, maybe I would have DNF'd. I think I would read more from that author, but as a book itself, it just didn't grab me as I wanted it to. Similar with The Last Chance Hotel, but that, to be fair, is a middle grade, and I always feel like with middle grade, yeah, some of them I adore, but the ones that I don't, is it fair for me to judge them when I'm not the target audience in any way, shape or form? Moving on to something slightly more positive, I had an awful lot of really, really good books in these 3 months. So I'm going to rattle through them. I'm not going to tell you too much about them, maybe just a little genre or a couple of sentences, and you can make your own decisions on whether you'd want to pick them up. But for me, these were all 5-star reads. They were all books I would go back and reread. I really enjoyed them. I've already said that in January I read The Shawshank Redemption along with Salem's Lot, and Shawshank was a big success for me. I also watched the movie adaptation of it at the same time, and honestly I think it's one of the best adaptations I've seen. It hit everything in the book as closely as it could. It changed a couple of things, but they were things I thought were smart choices for change, and if anything it actually helped me see how the escape had worked a little bit clearer in my head. So I love the book, I love the adaptation, I thought they went incredibly well together. In terms of successful adaptations, I also in January fell down the Heated Rivalry rabbit hole. I think I started reading Heated Rivalry, and at some point during that I started watching the show. Then when I got to the Scott and Kip episode, by then I'd finished the book, and I switched over and read Game Changer and then finished out the series, I think. It was all happening at once. I had a fantastic time. I keep meaning to pick up the next book in the series and I just haven't yet, but it is on my Aurelium TBR for this month, so I'm hoping to get to it. While I was really invested in hockey romance, apparently now, I also read Shots on Net, which was I want to say it was more of a cozy romance, doing the sports romance trope than the books with all the glistening torsos. This one was about a maths student who is looking for a place to stay and ends up staying with a hockey player at his college. The book itself didn't spend that much time talking about hockey, but it did have some really interesting representation. It did do a really cute, I'm not even sure it's Grumpy Sunshine, but it was really cute, it was really cozy, it was very low angst stakes, and I think I would want to continue with that series too. I read that I think at the same at the same time as I read Heated Rivalry, and they are both in a blog together, so I'll put that below. I also read A Ballad for Jasmine Town, which is the second book in Molly Ringle's kind of fairy world type series, where we have a really current day society but on a magically isolated island that they share with the Fae realm. Ballad for Jasmine Town was very much about music and about immigration and about kind of cultures clashing. I really enjoyed it. The first book was more of an adventure quest story, doing a bit of a Sleeping Beauty retelling. This felt more setting up its own world and really world building that. I think technically it's a prequel, but I had a really good time expanding the world that I already knew. And then my last kind of 5-star January, because January was clearly successful. I did spend a lot of time reading Salem's Lot, but I also then managed to fly through a few. How to Lose a Goblin in 10 Days by Jessie Sylva, I want to say, was my most anticipated book of January. I have already put out a vlog where I explained that this year I'm trying to pick one new release each month that I am the most excited about of all the most exciting books that month, and actually read it in that month, so that it doesn't sit on my shelf and become a rainy day book. It doesn't fall off my radar. By the time I get to it, I've lost interest. I'm reading it when I get it. Of course, being the first month, January threw up a dilemma immediately because I was torn between The Poet Empress and How to Lose a Goblin in 10 Days. The Poet Empress, I decided that I really wanted the US cover because it's stunning, and I prefer it to the UK cover, so I had to order that over, so it was going to take a little bit longer anyway. And then, as I said, I ended up with a bit of a cold for a couple of weeks, and the cozy, romantic, pastoral fantasy was definitely the better choice for the mood I personally was in at the time. It was everything you'd want in a really kind of Hobbiton inspired cozy, but it also had a little bit of bite to it. It did talk about these two groups of people with very different viewpoints on the world, them being potentially manipulated by outside influences, finding, you know, the common ground. As I said, in February I was in a bit of, not a reading slump, but a reading slowdown. But the two that really stood out to me were Below by Alexandria Warwick. That's the one I've already talked about. I read during Polarathon with the North Wind, and this is her Inuit inspired one. It was so good. It was so fast paced. We have a young girl whose sister's face is stolen by a monster, and she goes off kind of across the, I guess, like icy tundra to confront the face stealer and get her sister's face back. She finds herself in a kind of Elsa type ice castle with the face stealer, but also this kind of psychotic, I guess like a kind of goddess, and she has to endure various trials and tribulations to try and find her sister's face and defeat the monsters. It was a really good one, and I'm excited to continue with that series. Then the last book that I gave 5 stars in February was The Summer War by Naomi Novik. This is a novella, so it's very short, and maybe again, much with the cozy fantasies in this kind of period of the year, maybe this is what I needed, as I wasn't really in the mood for big long books, but I had a great time with this. It was basically, I guess, a story for if the Lannisters from Game of Thrones existed in a world with fae and a young Cersei ended up betrothed to a fairy king. I had a great time. I loved the political fantasy angle there. I loved the amount of character building that Novik was able to do in such a short space of time. I loved the world building she crammed in here. There was lots going on and it was really well done. I'm usually not a short story person, but I enjoyed this one so much that I am going to be picking up Novik's short story anthology for the Our Fantasy Bingo this year. Now in March, as I said, I was focusing on mysteries, and so it's no surprise that I found quite a few that I like. It's one of my favourite genres. I was fully expecting and hoping to find some really good books. So the first one, unsurprisingly, is Mirage City by Lev A.C. Rosen. This is the 4th book in his Evander Mills series. It's a historical mystery set in 1950s San Francisco. We follow a previously closeted PI, and there's lots in this series of exploration of different queer issues at the time. In this one, Andy takes a trip through to LA, back to where he grew up, as he investigates a missing persons case. And there's queer biker gangs, there's different queer liberation movements, there's talk of conversion therapy, and we get to see Andy dipping his toe into other queer communities. We get to see him kind of expanding his worldview. This is one of my favourite mystery series of all time. I love it. I think it does such a good job of really immersing you in the historical setting that it's painting, and it was no surprise that this was a 5-star. Then I had 2 other historical mysteries that I hadn't been expecting to love. Historical mysteries really aren't my favourite type of mystery. No idea why, they don't give me that same buzz as a contemporary. But I managed to find 2. The Body Under the Piano, which is an Aggie Morton Mystery Queen mystery, is a middle grade set in kind of the Edwardian era in Torquay in England, and following 2 young children that are basically Agatha Christie as a 12-year-old and her friend, who is very much modelled on a child version of Hercule Poirot. The 2 of them investigate when Aggie's piano teacher finds a body under the piano in her dance studio. The next one was Murder at the Mayfair Hotel by C.J. Archer. This is the first book in her Cleo Fox mysteries. I read this as part of the Cozy Mystery Book Club, and I read it because it was for the book club and also free on Kindle. Otherwise, I probably wouldn't have picked it up, and that would have been a real shame because I had such a good time with this. Again, completely unexpected. This follows Cleo, who has come from a kind of poor background but has a wealthy family. When her grandparents die, she then goes off to stay at her wealthy family's hotel, and then I think the series as a whole takes place largely within this hotel setting, and I loved the hotel setting. It was so much fun. We really got a kind of upstairs downstairs angle, as Cleo doesn't completely fit in with either camp, but also they both make her feel so welcome. So we get to see her spending time with her cousins, her uncle, in this very kind of wealthy arena. And then we also get to see her spend time with the maids and the downstairs staff, and she fits in quite well there too. When a patron or a hotel customer is found murdered, one of the staff is accused by the police, and Cleo gets involved partly because she doesn't feel like the lower class poorer people should just be sacrificed on the altar of finding a suspect and protecting the hotel's reputation, but she is also helping because as publicity spirals, potentially the hotel is going to suffer for that, and she wants to help her family. So she has kind of 2 motives and 2 worlds, and I really enjoyed this one. It looks like quite a long running series, so I'm looking forward to continuing with it. My most successful book of maybe even the whole quarter was The Raven Scholar by Antonia Hodgson. Again, a mystery, but this one a complete second world fantasy where we have an emperor coming to the end of his 24-year term, holds a contest for, they're kind of like religious groups, but also you could think of them, I guess, as like districts or houses, whatever. Each of these 8 sects follows a kind of animal deity and tries to internalize the qualities of that animal. They are now all in a competition to become the next emperor, but when the Raven candidate is killed, our protagonist, who is one of the scholars, has to step into her shoes, try and compete so that she can actually investigate the crime that's occurred. This one was so good, it was so twisty, and there were multiple times where I thought I understood what was happening but I didn't, but then when I explained it I was just seeing it through the different lens. It was an absolute masterpiece in, I don't want to say an unreliable narrator, but like an unreliable world, an unreliable concept, showing you exactly what the narrator saw but then twisting it all on its head, and it was really good. And while it wrapped up a lot of things in that first book, there are still so many unknowns that I am super excited to get to the sequel when it comes out this year. I've seen so many people rave about this book and I just didn't think it was for me. I think maybe I had got it in my head that this was a dark academia, that scholar being in the title, and I know that dark academia doesn't really do it for me, so I had just avoided it. but it blew me out of the water. It was amazing. And then the last book that I gave 5 stars in March was kind of unrelated to all the others. I tacked it on when I had finished all my kind of mystery books for the month as a bit of a palette cleanser. Starshipped by Cat Sebastian is a contemporary romance. We are following 2 actors who are basically on a Star Trek style TV series and have been for about 7 years. They have a kind of antagonistic, ignore each other working relationship, but as one of them is starting to think about leaving the show, the other has a family crisis. They go off together to build up some good publicity for them both in case the news of one of them leaving becomes public knowledge. So there's a little bit of a fake dating angle, which is always a winner for me, but there's also that kind of being thrust into confined spaces on a road trip and being forced to see each other's lives from an angle that they've never seen each other's lives. And I had a great time with it. I really, really enjoyed it. Books about celebrities are another trope that just never works for me, but putting in the road trip and the fake dating, even though they were actually relatively minor aspects, together with Cat Sebastian's just absolute skill at writing chemistry, I had such a good time with it. So jumping over to all the reading challenges that I said I wasn't going to do. The first one is the Year in Aldea. This is a kind of side quest to the Magical Readathon that runs in April and September. It is a gorgeous kind of choose your own adventure style board where each month different kind of route possibilities open up. I played the board last year, it's the same board this year, but I'm taking a different route. If you read the book that is the prompt for that month, in that month you get 10 points towards your Magical Readathon character. So this is the one challenge where I'm really trying to stick with like the prompt for that month I read in that month. The other ones I'm a little more loosey-goosey with. So far I have read the January, February and March books all in January, February and March, but I'm going to be sitting out April's book because I don't have a book that fits the prompt. Magical Readathon itself is on the go. I'm quite happy just to lose the 10 points for this one, and I'll get back to it in May. For the buzzword title challenge, I am not doing great. I'm not super fussed about reading them in the month they come out, but I also don't want to try and go too far ahead. So far I've not filled January, although I do think I will read the book for that this month as part of Aurelium. So we're just gonna say that I've read it, and that's After the Fall by Edward Ashton. It fits the before and after prompt. February's keyboard keys prompt I haven't read yet, but again I have a book in mind for that, so I'm hoping that that is going to be a book I'll get to probably in May. And then for March the prompt is This or That or These, and I read these Shattered Spires for it, so I got that one and I read it in the month I was meant to. The other two I do intend to fill. I know what I'm going to fill them with, I just need to do that. I have done much better with the buzzword cover prompts. January, still admittedly no. I haven't read anything with an internal body part on the cover, but I do have a couple of books that I own that have anatomical hearts on them, so I intend to get to that. Then for February's silhouette, I put The Murder at the Mayfair Hotel, which we talked about. For March's movement, I put Midnight in Everwood. With these two, I didn't actually read either in the month the prompt was for. I sort of switched them around, but I read them close enough to the month the prompt was for that I feel like they count. By the end of March, I had finished the Our Fantasy bingo board for the year. I have an entire wrap-up video talking about it, so we're not going to talk about all 25 prompts, but I did finish it in easy mode and I'm ready to start the new bingo board as of the 1st of April. Then finally, I have my own bingo board challenge. I created a cozy mystery bingo. Again, I'll link that in the description, but it runs the exact same way as Our Fantasy or Horror Bingo or Romantasy Bingo, in that you have an easy mode and a hard mode for each of the 25 prompts, and the goal is to fill them with as many cozy or classic mysteries as you can. Because it's mine, I feel like I should be ambitious, so I have decided to fill a board on easy mode and a board on hard mode if at all possible. So far on easy mode I have 3 fills. Dead in Dublin for An Unusual Job or Hobby. This is a protagonist that drives a limo. Coastal views to die for a love interest that isn't a cop. In this we have a travel photographer. And A Murder Most Camp for a book with hot weather setting. This is set at a summer camp. Then I'm actually doing better on the hard mode. Here we have that Body Under the Piano book for a book that you know nothing about except the cover. A Box Full of Murders by Janice Hallett for Spell Sleuth in the title. This is again set at a summer camp, but a middle grade mystery and a mixed media piece where you are following documents from a summer camp that ran in the 80s to find out what happened. Three Bags Full by Leonie Swan makes another comeback here on the 10+ years old square. We see Mirage City on Not So Cozy, Murder at the Mayfair Hotel in Name in the Title, and A Slice of Mystery on the under a 3.5 star rating square. So no lines on either board so far, but considering it only started at the beginning of March, I think I'm doing really well. Obviously, March being March Mystery Madness month, I knew I'd be reading a lot of mystery. That's why I chose to have the bingo board start in March so that we'd get off to a really good start, and that obviously has worked really well for me. In terms of non-bookish content, I have had a few really entertaining shows this quarter. As I said, I started with A Woman of Substance. I'm only 2 episodes in, but I am enjoying it. It's visually gorgeous. The acting seems really good so far. I'm hoping to watch more of that over the course of April. I have watched Heated Rivalry a couple of times. I was utterly hooked. I think, was it maybe February? I think I really got into it and I watched it 2 or 3 times while we had the Now TV subscription. I really enjoyed that and I can definitely see it becoming a real comfort show. I think because there's not a huge amount of plot in some of the episodes, it is about the characters. It worked for me when I was on the sofa not feeling really up to much brain work. I've really enjoyed Begonia, Steve. I've been watching Jadewind Unveiled on Netflix. It is a detective murder mystery show set in the Tang Dynasty and it is beautiful. The costumes, the sets, it's a stunning show. And the mystery, especially the first one, which I think spanned the first kind of 4 episodes, was really engaging. I didn't see the resolution, the twist coming, but it was really well done. I think there's like 36 episodes on Netflix and each mystery is a few episodes at least, maybe 4 or 5, and they kind of bleed through into each other at this point. I'm currently, I think maybe like 8 or 9 episodes in, because it does take a little bit longer with translated shows because the cat loves to sit directly in front of the subtitles. And again, something that I'm really hoping I'll continue in April. At the moment, my current TV obsession has been Louis Theroux documentaries. We watched his Manosphere movie on Netflix and then was reminded of how I used to really like his documentaries. BBC has quite a lot of those older episodes there. So I've been going back and watching some of his older documentaries kind of when I've wanted something non-fiction. My plan for April is to continue some of those, especially the ones that came out in the late 90s, early 2000s, as part of the Old School April watch-a-thon aspect. Let me know what you think of this video. I know it's going to be very rambly, so if you got this far, please leave me a stack of books emoji, something to show you were here. Let me know how you thought this kind of format worked, if there's a way to tighten this up to make it something that's more enjoyable to watch as a recap summary, and I'll try and kind of implement any of those thoughts or changes when I do my second quarter wrap up at the end of June. Thank you for watching and I'll hope to see you in the next video. Goodbye.